Good evening and welcome. I'm Tim Bolton, Head of Programmes here at Dartington. And on behalf of everybody at Schumacher College and Dartington, I'd like to welcome you to this Schumacher College Earth Talk, Whole Earth Education, with Satish Kumar and Stephan Harding. As many of you will know, we've been holding Earth Talks for a number of years, face-to-face in the Old Poston and the Great Hall at Dartington. It's a fundamental part of our learning community, and we look forward to doing so again very soon. Indeed, we're really looking forward to the return of many of our MA students just after Easter, and short courses hopefully starting again on the campus by the middle of May. As with the previous talk, the audience appears to be joining us from across the globe, so welcome everybody and thank you all so much for supporting the work of Schumacher College. First, I just wanted to say a few words about the format of the evening. In a moment, I'll hand over to Satish and Stephan, who'll both talk for about 15 minutes each. We do want the session to be as accessible and interactive as possible, so please do use the chat button on the bottom of your screen to share thoughts with us and your fellow audience members. And we would welcome questions throughout using the Q&A link, again at the bottom of the window, but please accept our apologies if we don't manage to get to all of the questions, which we'll look at towards the end of the programme. After Satish and Stephan have spoken, they'll be in conversation for around 15 minutes, and then I'll have a chance to put some of those questions to them. And I hope, if we have time, that Stephan might also play for us a bit. In total, we anticipate the session to last for about an hour, but maybe an hour to an hour and a quarter. So let me start by introducing Satish and Stephan. I'm sure many of you will also already know them and be well aware of them. But Satish Kumar is a former monk and long-term peace and environment activist. He's been quietly setting the global agenda for change for over 50 years. He was just 9 when he left his family home to join the wandering Jains, and 18 when he decided he could achieve more back in the world. Campaigning for land reform in India and working to turn Gandhi's vision of a renewed India and a peaceful world into reality. In 1973, Satish settled in the United Kingdom, taking up the post of editor of Resurgence magazine, a position he's held ever since, making him the UK's longest serving editor of the same magazine. During this time, he's been the guiding spirit behind a number of now internationally respected ecological and educational ventures, including Schumacher College. Satish has authored numerous books, including No Destination, Autobiography of a Pilgrim, Soul, Soil and Society, A New Trinity for Our Time, and most recently, Elegant Simplicity, The Art of Living Well. Dr. Stephan Harding. In 1990, Stephan was one of the founding members of Schumacher College, where he worked closely with James Lovelock, with whom he has maintained a long-lasting friendship and scientific collaboration. Stephan coordinated and lectured on the college's MSc Holistic Science for nearly 2 decades, teaching on the core modules of the programme, as well as on several short courses at the college. They were jointly appointed as founding chairholders of the Arne Nass Chair in Global Justice and the Environment at the University of Oslo. And at Schumacher College, Stephan has taught alongside many of the world's leading ecological thinkers and activists, including Arne Nass, Fritjof Capra, Brian Goodwin, Vandana Shiva, David Abram, James Lovelock, and Lynn Margulis. He is now the Deep Ecology Fellow at Schumacher College. So it's with great pleasure that I hand you over to Stephan.
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you. Thank you very much for those lovely introductions. And hello, everyone from around the world who's joining us tonight for our Earth Talk on whole Earth education. I was just thinking about my own education. And I think after primary school, it was no longer a whole Earth education. When I was at primary school, it was whole Earth. We used to go look in ponds, roll around in the mud, do paintings, all sorts of wonderful things. That stopped as soon as I went to secondary school. Then it became no longer whole Earth education, but it taught me how to disconnect myself from the Earth. As soon as I started doing my O-levels and then A-levels and then went on to university all the way up to doctorate level, the education was really about how we were separate from the Earth, separate from nature, how nature is this external object out there, which we have to use our education to control and to dominate and to use it only for human benefit. Of course, we had to be careful not to mess it up too much. But the point was that we humans are superior, the superior species on the planet, and the whole of nature is there for us to use as we want, carefully, so we don't mess it up. But basically, nature was an externality. And of course, we know now that we got this idea from the scientific revolution, from Descartes and the other founders of modern science, wonderful as it is. And unfortunately, we now know that 400 years later, this education, mainstream education for disconnection from the earth, has now reached the point where the earth herself is in a terrible state. We all know about the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis and the social crises that face us. Now the pandemic is also part of that educational system, which has disconnected us from nature because it's led us to destroy nature. So what we've been trying to do at Schumacher College right from the beginning, and it's a great honor for me to work with Satish right from the start 30 years ago, is to see if we could re-envision education for grown-ups to make it a really whole earth education. What is a whole earth? What does it mean to have a whole earth? And what would it mean to educate for a whole earth? Well, I think what we've discovered over the last 30 years is that in order for us to have whole earth education, we humans have to be whole. We have to be whole. Our education, my experience of my own education, wonderful though it was, and grateful as I am for it, is that it didn't make me whole. It wasn't interested in making me whole. It was interested in making me a useful participant in the domination of nature, or at best in the careful stewardship and management of nature. But it wasn't interested in me, my wholeness. That didn't come into it at all. In fact, it was embarrassing to talk about wholeness. It was considered new agey and flaky to talk about wholeness. So at Schumacher College, we tried to reverse that. And we're trying to explore how if we become whole within the earth, then we can have a whole earth education. A whole earth isn't just the earth being whole, it's ourselves being whole within the earth. Then we have a whole earth education. So the question becomes, what is human wholeness? Because without that, we don't know what a whole earth is. We can't perceive the wholeness of the earth. I can't perceive the wholeness of the earth unless I'm whole in myself. So what do we do about that in this terrible crisis? Well, in my case, I found the psychology of C.G. Jung incredibly helpful. And also things that Satish has been saying too. But for C.G. Jung, he said, if you want to be whole, it's quite simple. You have to cultivate 4 aspects of yourself. And students who've been at the college have heard me say this before, so forgive me for the repetition. But basically, we have 4 functions. We human beings, psychologically, we have 4 functions of our consciousness. One of them is thinking, which is rational thought, which we're very familiar with, and which, of course, our education stresses. My education as a scientist was all about thinking, and marvelous, sophisticated scientific thinking. I love thinking, I'm not against it, but it's not enough, because Jung says opposite to thinking is feeling. And my education showed me nothing about feeling. What is feeling? Feeling is not emotion for Jung. It's being able to perceive the value of something. And it's very much connected with perceptions of beauty and value. So for example, out here outside our study, I have some trees. I see the beauty, the value of the tree, the importance of the tree. I connect with the tree through a sense of how beautiful, how important, what a big contribution it's making to the regulation of the planet's temperature. That's the feeling function. And at Schumacher College, we try to cultivate that as much as our thinking function. Then there's 2 other functions. There's intuition, which is a sense of where something has come from and where it's going, what the tendency of something is. That's our intuition. And the last function is our sensing, which is our direct sensory experience of nature. So we have these 4 functions: thinking, feeling, they're opposites, and intuition and sensing, they're opposites. And to be whole people, and to be able to perceive the earth as a living whole, we need to cultivate those 4 functions within ourselves. Now, Satish talks about head, hearts, and hands. So it's very, very similar. And he has 3. We have 4, but very similar. So our whole effort at Schumacher College over 30 years has been to cultivate these 4 ways of knowing for ourselves and so with our students, so we can become members of the earth, of a whole earth community. Now, I don't want to speak for too long, but one way we discovered of doing this involves bees, because I was teaching about how bee swarms find a new nest site. And this is very difficult for them because they've left their nest site with a queen, and they're on a branch, and they're very vulnerable, and they have to find a nest site very quickly. So in my whole earth education of this process, I show the students the science of this. And then the students, we go out into the woods, and the students and me, we all become bees. And we all get into a huddle in the woods near the college, and we're a swarm of bees. The rule is no talking from now on. As soon as we're bees, no talking. We're not humans, we're bees. And out there in the woods, previously, we've placed 3 or 4 artificial nest sites. And one of them is really good. You know, I mean, when you see it, you can't mistake it. It's got branches and flowers hanging out of it. And then there are other ones that aren't quite so good, you know, just an empty white bucket, basically. And so all us bees, we go off, we fly off into the woods, and we look for these nest sites. We know we're there. When we find a nest site, we assess it, and we come back to the swarm, and we start doing a waggle dance, showing the direction where we found our nest site and the quality. So the bigger the waggle, the better it is, right? So can you imagine all the students are dancing and waggling and doing a dance, and then when you come back to the swarm, you look at what the other students are doing. You say, oh, look, this student is really going crazy with their dance. I better go and check out their nest site. So you go off in their direction, the direction their dance is showing, and you look for the nest site. Oh yeah, it really is better. Then you come back and you start dancing for that nest site. And eventually you see what's happened. This is what real bees do. Eventually, and I was amazed to see this when we did this, eventually nearly everybody is dancing for the best nest site. They're all waggling like mad in the same direction on the swarm. And then as one, there's a moment when a feeling comes over you. Now's the time to go. And everybody rushes off and finds the best nest site. I mean, we did that. We went to do it, and we're going to do it again. So we've done it twice. That was unbelievable. Now that, I would say, is whole earth education. Why? Because we're using all our 4 functions. We're not just learning about bees swarming in the classroom. We did that to begin with, of course, you know, with all the scientific data and all the graphs, but we actually become bees. We feel what it's like to be a bee. So we're using our thinking. We've done that. We've done the science. Our feeling, of course, is valuing which nest site is best than the other one. Our sensing is moving through the trees, looking for the nest site. I'll never forget the experience of running through the woods. I couldn't find a nest site. I thought, my God, maybe we won't be able to find any of the nest sites. And when I finally found one, it was such a joy to find it. And intuition, well, there's that intuitive moment when you feel the whole group of us bees, we all know exactly when it's time to go. We all went off together, boom, and found the best nest site. I mean, that for me is whole earth, is an example of whole earth education. One last one, if I may, if I've got just a few more minutes, is what we created at Schumacher College. It's called the Deep Time Walk. Many of our students have done it. We walk 4.6 kilometers, mostly on the coast or anywhere. You can do it anywhere. And that represents the age of the earth, 4.6 kilometers, representing 4,600 million years, which is how old the earth is. And we just walk that. I'm the guide, and I stop and I say, at this point, the dinosaurs, at this point, there were bacteria, at this point, blah, blah, blah. And every millimeter we walk on that walk, on the deep time walk, every millimeter represents 1,000 years. Can you imagine a millimeter? Every millimeter. Every 500 meters is 500,000 years. Every meter, every 2 footsteps is 1,000,000 years. And we walk slowly, meditatively, and we've experienced the incredibly evolutionary story of the earth, which has come from our thinking, of course, from our science, but we're also using our feeling, our sensing, and our intuition. And that's what I would say is a little taste of whole earth education at the college. I mean, there's many more things that we do, but we haven't got time to go into that. I mean, in holistic science, of course, which was the first master's degree ever at the course, which Brian Goodwin and I created, it's all about whole earth education using Goethean science and philosophy and intuition and feeling and sensing and drawing. And it's like being back in primary school, but being an adult. All right, I think that's all I wanted to say. perhaps now hand over to Satish.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? You can hear me? Yes. Thank you, Stephan, for this beautiful talk. In a nutshell, you have said it all, whole earth education. And I would like to say, to start with, I would like to say that it is a great joy to see that Schumacher College has been around for 30 years. And when we were beginning in 1991 or in 1990, just before beginning, when I suggested this idea, people said, this is too idealistic. Nobody's going to come to Schumacher College to learn about ecology or deep ecology or Gaia or something like that. So, and people said, maybe you might last 4 years, 5 years, then you have to fold it. So people were very pessimistic. But I'm delighted that after 30 years, Schumacher College is still here and we are commemorating this 30th anniversary. So it gives me great joy. To celebrate this 30th anniversary, we are doing a few things. First of all, we have published a book. It's called Transformative Learning, published by New Society Publishers in Canada. And it's available from Schumacher College and also from resurgence.org. So this is a commemorative book, Transformative Learning, Reflections of 30 Years of Head, Heart, and Hands at Schumacher College. And for me, that title sums up the whole earth education. As Stephan said, that we have thinking, feeling, sensing, and what was the fourth one, Stephan?
Intuition.
Intuition, yeah, intuiting. So I mean, that relates to head, heart, and hands as well. When we are going to a university or a school, our teacher look at us as a student, and they think that student has no body. The student has only head, only brain. And they plan all their curriculum, all their syllabus to feed the brain, to educate the head. And even that education of head has two hemispheres, the left brain and the right brain. And the educational system only feeds the half of our brain, the left brain, the rational brain, the academic intellectual brain, not the intuitive brain, not the feeling brain. So student, how can you provide whole earth education in a university or a school if you can't even look at the student and see them as a whole body? So Schumacher College whole earth education is, I coined this phrase, head, heart, and hands. So we are not only head, but we are also hearts. And our education should include our relationship with natural world, our relationship with each other, human world, our relationship with ourselves. So cultivating some spiritual values, cultivating compassion, cultivating generosity, cultivating reverence for life, a sense of the sacred. All these things have to be a part of educational system. Unless we create a heart connection, unless we make this journey, it may be a very long journey or maybe a short journey, a journey from head to heart. And so cultivating compassion, cultivating reverence, cultivating a sense of sacred, cultivating a feeling for nature, unity with nature, our relationship with nature, that is as important as knowledge. Reality is not about objects, where our modern education is fixed. Reality is about relationship between the objects. And that's when the moment you come to relationship, that's in a way some quantum physics will touch on that. It's the reality, the existence is not about objects. It's about relationship. And relationship is heart-oriented. And one of our teachers at Schumacher College, Thomas Berry, who came to Schumacher College, and he coined a phrase at Schumacher College. He said that the universe is not a collection of objects. It's a communion of subjects. That's a very beautiful phrase. I think quantum physics and deep ecology and Gaia and Thomas Berry, they all come together in this sense. And so that is very fundamental and very paramount importance of our learning, is to cultivate head and heart together. But we are also a body. We are not just abstract thinking and feeling and a heart, but we are also body. And if we leave our body out, how can we have a whole earth education unless we have a whole body education? And therefore at Schumacher College, we said, we are not only an institution, we are not only a kind of college. College is a very nice word, collegiate. We are a community. I wanted to emphasize it. I wanted to highlight it. So we are a community and we work together as a community. It's not, education is not a personal pursuit of my knowledge, my success, my degree, how I'm going to be successful, how am I going to earn more money, how I'm going to be powerful, how am I going to make a mark in the world. So all this egotistical education, which is our modern education, is very much based on. At Schumacher College, we shift from ego education to eco education. We change from G to C. An ecological education is eco education, where we are together as a community. Without community, for me, this personal pursuit of education is not enough. So, and in a community, how do you make a community? You eat together, you cook together, you garden together, you go for a walking together on dartboard, you go on a walking together for a deep time walk. All these things doing together, that to me is the most important gift of Schumacher College to the world of education, that we work together as a community, as a family. And so Earth community and a human community and Schumacher College community and a Dartington community, that is as important as the knowledge we achieve. And so head, heart, and hands, these three things, education of head, education of heart, and education of hands, these three things came together in the context of community. And so we are, in addition to publishing this book, which is a collection of beautiful articles by yourself, Stephan, you have contributed, and our head of Schumacher College presently, Pavel Schenkel, he has communicated our future of education, but also many of our past teachers, such as Christoph Capra, Vandana Shiva, Bill McKibben, David Orr, many teachers, Vandana Shiva I mentioned. So many teachers have contributed their articles, but also Schumacher College has inspired many groups around the world to start similar projects. And we have contributed, they have contributed, and we have included in this book the experiences of people starting their own projects. So it's a Schumacher-inspired project in China, in Japan, in India, in Brazil, in Colombia, all these countries. So these people have contributed how they were inspired by Schumacher College and how they started their own project in their own country, so that they don't always have to go to Schumacher College to England. They can have education in their own country. So that is a wonderful, uplifting and inspiring thing for me to see. And so now we are doing another little project of this earth education. Not only Schumacher College setting an example of good education, holistic education, whole earth education, but my mission, and I think Schumacher College mission and Dartington's mission, is to transform the educational system altogether, not only in Britain, but around the world. And therefore, as a commemorative project, we have launched an essay competition on the theme of education as if people and planet matter. At the moment, our education is as if economy matter. Economy is paramount. And everything is sacrificed at the altar of the economy. Nature has become a resource for the economy. Humans have become a resource for the economy. We call them human resources. What a terrible word, human resources and natural resources. So nature is not a resource for the economy. Nature is the source of life itself. And humans are not a resource for the economy. Economy should be a resource for the human well-being and human enlightenment and human happiness and human satisfaction, human fulfillment. And so economy should be the means to an end and not the end in itself. And the nature and human welfare, human well-being and human fulfillment should be the end. So education as if people and planet matter, not economy matter, not production, consumption, economic growth, profit, all these things we have become the paramount importance in our society at the moment. And all our educational system is upholding this old paradigm of industrial growth, old paradigm of economic growth, old paradigm of more production, more consumption. Nature is there just for our use. We can do with it what we like. This kind of arrogant view of humanity, that has to change. The new age is the age of ecology. 21st century is the century of ecology. And this century, this is a new kind of education. Education which will take care of our planet Earth, the whole Earth. And so whole Earth education should be not only a small experiment, a small example in this Schumacher College. The whole Earth education should permeate and spread all over the world, in every university. Oxford should change. Your alma mater, Stephan, Oxford should change. Oxford is upholding an out-of-date system. Cambridge must change. Harvard and Yale University must change. All the big universities of the world, they must change. They have become out-of-date institutions, and they are upholding an economic growth model, a profit-making, production, consumption, and using nature as a mode for human benefit. Not only for human benefit, actually. It's only for the benefit of 1 or 2 or 5% of people. 1 or 2 or 5% of people in the world own more than 50% of resources and 50% of wealth. So this system is not even for all human beings. System is for a very small minority of human beings. And therefore, I want to challenge Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, all the big universities. You are out of date. You are no longer relevant. Your education is becoming a burden to our earth. We have to change this educational system, and we have to create a whole earth education system where we see human beings as an integral part of natural world. And well-being of nature and well-being of human are totally interrelated, interconnected, interdependent, integral. There cannot be separation between the well-being of planet Earth and nature and well-being of humans. So this separation has to come to an end. And all the universities of the world are upholding the paradigm of separation, disconnection, ruling over nature, dominating nature, subjugating nature, using nature, exploiting nature for the benefit of humans. And not only humans, but a small number of minority of humans. I want to challenge that. So this competition, education as if people and planet matter, is a celebration and a commemoration of the 30th year of Schumacher College. And I want to get new ideas, new proposal. And this COP26 is a good opportunity for us to raise that question in Glasgow. And one of our students, former student, Nigel Topic, is one of the champions of the COP26 in Glasgow. This is a great contribution the Schumacher College has made. And so the question of education should be raised at the level of COP26. And also after COVID-19, this post-coronavirus situation, we need to take this some example and learn from this terrible, dreadful situation and say, now we are going to have a new, harmonious, healthy, healing relationship with the natural world. And we are going to educate our people in such a way that we can live not just for our personal ego, but for ecological lifestyle, ecological living. So from ego to eco, education has to shift from ego to eco. That is my whole earth education. And that is why I am delighted that we are celebrating this 30th anniversary. And I hope that many of the listeners who are listening to this talk will buy a copy of this transformative learning from Schumacher College website, and also participate in this essay competition. And then we are hoping and planning to hold a symposium towards the end of this year to say and highlight this great idea of transforming education so that education can serve the planet Earth, serve humanity, and not be a burden on the planet Earth and not be a burden on humanity. That is my vision. That is my passion. And at age 84, I'm still committed to this challenge and this mission. And I hope that we can make a big impact. And Stephan, it has been a pleasure, honor, and delight to work with you for the last 30 years. And we are together in this journey. And now we have wonderful team there at Dartington, Tim Bolton, Pavel Senkel, Alan Bolden, and Catherine Gledhill. All these people are wonderful. Lou Rainbow. So we all together can be a beacon of light, a beacon of hope for the world. And Dartington and Schumacher College together can lead this transformation of education and transformation of our society so that we can have our economy and our life for millions of years to come. Our modern economy cannot last for millions of years. It's a very linear economy. We have to transform this economy into a circular economy so that our economy can be sustained for millions of years, like the economy of nature. Economy of nature has sustained itself and the planet for the millions of years. The humans have to learn from nature. Nature is our true teacher. Nature is our true mentor. If we can learn from nature and have an economy of nature, then human beings have a good future. So with that hope, I conclude my remarks. Thank you again, Tim, for introducing warmly. And thank you, Stephan, for making the first lecture. Thank you. And so what do you think, Stephan? I would like to ask you your view about transforming this educational system. This old and out-of-date educational system has to be transformed because this is creating new generation of people more and more to go back to society and uphold the old industrial economic growth, production, consumption, materialism paradigm. Unless new generation of people come out in the world and change this system and embrace the whole earth education, our future is bleak. What do you think?
Well, of course, Satish, I completely agree with you. And I was thinking of, you mentioned Oxford, where I did my doctorate, and we're all in beautiful medieval colleges in Oxford, but we didn't cook our own food, or we didn't look after the gardens. That was done by other people, and we were all this elite, at high table with our gowns and everything, and all we did was cultivate our intellect. That's all we did, all about the intellect, exactly as you said. So what about if we could convince one of the Oxford colleges, maybe Worcester College, because I think the dean or whatever is your friend.
Yes, that's right.
What about if we say to the Worcester College is one of the most beautiful colleges in Oxford. I used to go there. I love it. So what if we say to Worcester College, look, why don't you do a pioneering experiment? Why don't you get the students to work alongside the kitchen staff to cook the meals? We don't want to make the kitchen staff unemployed because it's their work.
No. Yeah.
But they work alongside the kitchen staff to cook the meals. What about if the students also work alongside the gardening staff to look after the grounds? And what about if we change the curriculum so that we're introducing deep ecology, Gaia theory, all sorts of things we teach here.
Systems thinking, Gaia theory, deep ecology, Jungian psychology, spirituality, and also if we reconnect with the ancient spirit of Oxford and Cambridge, they're very medieval universities. One of the ways I survived at Oxford, which is a very sort of aggressive intellectual environment, was to spend a lot of time in the ancient chapels, the medieval chapels of their colleges. Yeah. So what about if we helped students to go and just sit in the chapels and absorb the medieval feeling of those times? Because in medieval Oxford and Cambridge, they were really contemplating nature to a large extent. Yeah. So I would say, as a strategy, why don't we try and work on one of the big colleges in Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard Oxford and Cambridge are good because they're collegiate, and we try to get them to shift towards a more Schumacher way of doing things. Yeah. No, that is a very good idea. And also, as you say, Worcester College, they are good friends as well. And there's one person there who is a very good friend. So I will propose this idea. I would say that every school in our country, every college, every university must have an associated farm or a garden, so that young people not only learn education from their head, but they also develop the hand skills. They should be able to touch the soil, because in one of my trinity with Soil Soul Society, I put soil at the top, because we are soil. We are made of soil. All our food comes from the soil. All our clothes come from the soil. But our education system does not touch the soil. We think dirt is dirty. We don't want to make our hands dirty. This is a very wrong conception. So we need to have every school in the country, every college, every university having a garden, having a farm where the teachers and the students can go together and learn about biology, about ecology, about cosmology, about all the wonderful academic subjects, but in practical way, rather than just from books and information and a kind of on the computers and so on. Actual learning should come from the experience. At the moment we are divided, we don't value experience. We only value information. I would like to say that information and knowledge should become a lived experience. What do you think?
I agree. I think experience is incredibly important. And I think we could start a revolution by just getting the students at all levels, from primary school all the way up to university level, to have deep experience of connection with soil, soul, and society, to really experience the soil, experience the biodiversity of the planet, the air, to feel it, to how alive the air is, feel how alive the water is, feel how alive the plants growing in their gardens are. And we could do a ground up revolution, a revolution from the soil. So the students themselves demand a change in the educational system. They demand it. And then eventually when they vote, they'll be able to vote for that kind of educational system. So I think you're absolutely right. It should start with children, of course, all the way for children. But the thing is, we haven't got time to wait for those children that have been educated in this way to grow up. We haven't got that time. We've got to do it now. So I think, I noticed in the young folks who are at university, like a lot of our young students at Schumacher College, but also in universities where I go give talks sometimes, they're thirsting for this. It's almost as if the crisis has generated a consciousness of what's wrong with our society in young people, a thirst for wholeness, a thirst for reconnection with each other, with nature, with community, with the soil. And I think we need to nourish that and encourage that in our teenagers. And I think they're ready for it now. I think the young people are absolutely ready. It's a question of how do we do it? How do we get that started? How do we start give the system a little push so then it starts to spread?
Yes.
That's why I think one way, there are many other ways I'm sure we could all think of, but one way would be to work with a major university, say like Oxford, as I was saying, to get their students to do a Schumacher style education and then publicize it, make it a study for someone to study how those students feel in themselves, how they feel in relation to the earth, how it's changed their worldview, how they've now committed to doing something to help the planet rather than, as you say, exploit the planet. So it should be something we publicize and we show to the world what a brilliant educational system it is. And then we show it to all the young people, and they all start demanding this kind of education.
Yeah. No, that is a very good. I think we have a great opportunity at Dartington at this moment. Listeners might be interested to know that Dartington and Schumacher College, we are launching a new degree program in kind of regenerative agriculture. And so at this moment, we have a program for students who come to learn gardening for 6 months. And we have something like 7 or 8 acres of garden. And these students are spending their time producing food and learning about agroecology, permaculture, biodynamic farming, all the organic growing, all the new methodology they are learning. And that now going to be expanded a little bit more, because Dartington has got nearly 1,000 acres of land. And this land should be used as a resource for education, and a resource for inspiration and skills developing skills. So I think that is a very good example. And if we can, as you say, I will try to connect with my friends in Worcester College. And if we can persuade them to take some of these ideas of ecological regeneration and whole earth education into university system, that would be a wonderful thing to do. So thank you very much for that suggestion. And I think now it would be a good idea to open our discussion, Tim, for any other people might have some questions.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, both of you. And to anybody who's listening, it would be great if you had some questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we've got a few coming up. But I just wanted to ask, to start off with, I was reading a while ago that our government love this kind of the statement about teaching the 3 R's, which are apparently reading, writing, and arithmetic, and you don't need to know much spelling to know that not many of them start with R. But the original meaning of it, apparently, was reading, reckoning, and wroughting. Again, there's a problem with the number of R's, but making was always part of it. And we've completely lost that sense of making. And it feels to me like the head, heart, hand is absolutely right. That without the hand, we have very little.
Yeah, Tim, it's a very good point you are making about making. You know the word poet, the poet word, Greek word, poiesis, which means to make. If you use your imagination and you use your creativity and you use your hands and you make something, then you are a poet. You create a poem because you have used your imagination and you have used your creativity and use your hands holding a pen and writing on a piece of paper. And so that creative work becomes a poem. But poem, even a beautiful garden is a work of poetry. Even a beautiful food kitchen and a dining table and food on the dining table is a work of art. So art and poetry used to be part of making. And we humans are not mere consumers. We are makers. If we can have that consciousness, that will give us self-confidence, and that will drop the fear that we hold in our hands, that I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, because we are makers, we are not consumers. Consuming comes after making. So that's a very good point you are making. Thank you.
No. And I think the other thing from my perspective is one where we don't trust that individuals bring something to the table, that the students bring something to the table. And the most effective teaching I've ever seen is when, instead of teaching history and you teach a set of facts, you teach people how to be a historian. Or with science, you don't teach them a set of facts, you teach them how to be a scientist, how to analyze. And it's that kind of openness to the world that's incredibly important.
Very good, very good. Yeah.
I found when I first came to Schumacher College, you know, and we were cooking together. I remember the first course on Gaia Theory with James Lovelock. The students and me and the others, we were cooking in the kitchen. You know, I'd never done that before with my students. And the amazing thing was that the conversations we had whilst we were cooking were so profound, so deep, because we were in a totally different setting. It wasn't a classroom setting that we're all familiar with, you know, with ideas bouncing around, wonderful as that is. Now we were actually making a meal for the community. We were the community, looking after the community, a little section of the community, looking after the community. And as we chopped the carrots and, you know, chopped the onions and boiled up all the food and fried it, we talked so much, you know, we became a very powerful group of not just thinkers, but doers and feelers. And then the next day, another group of students would be cooking for us. And a week later, the same group would cook again. And that I would say in Schumacher College is one of the most powerful educational experiences you could have. It's not just cooking, it's also gardening together, you know, creating the community together. It's as you say, it's a kind of poetry. We become poets in the kitchen because we're making the community. We become poets in the garden. That's one of the great powers of Schumacher College. And, you know, I think if we mustn't lose that, mustn't be lost. It's one of the key aspects of Schumacher College, alongside the academic intellectual work, is cooking together and gardening together and doing things like that together. It's very, very
going for walking together on Dartmoor,
walking together,
learning from nature and experiencing in nature, all those three things together.
And there's another thing we used to do, which I think we do a little bit now, is making things together. We used to do wood carving together. We could also do clay making together. These things are very, very important and very underestimated in our educational system. People think, oh, it's just cooking, not so important. It's actually very vital for creating the community. Like those bees I was telling you about, you know, the bees experience. We were a community together looking for our nest sites, and we can do the same when we're cooking and gardening together. So it's an incredibly important aspect of the education for whole earth.
Good, good. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah. So Lonnie asks, which I think is a really interesting question. So assuming we could do this with the education system, what kind of society would support people who'd been through this? How would this change and evolve society?
Should I go first?
Yes, please, Satish.
The kind of society which we are envisioning, nature-based society, will be a society of self-reliant, confident human beings, and more decentralized economic system, more localized economic system. So that, for example, there's a big ship stuck in the Suez Canal, holding billions and billions of pounds and dollars of goods and making life difficult. If those things were made local, and you know what was happening in that ship? The wood was sent to China from England. Wood was sent to China to polish it, process it, make it ready for the floor, to make a floor in England. British wood going to China to be processed to come back to make a floor in England. And all those ships and all the fossil fuel used to do that. So a society which we create will be more decentralized, more local, more just. At the moment, our society is very unequal. A few small percent of people, very wealthy, holding billions and billions of dollars and thousands of acres of land and many, many big buildings and properties and so on. And the majority of people living like workers and wage earners and so on. Our new ecological society, where whole earth education is prevalent, will be more egalitarian and more need-based rather than greed-based. Mahatma Gandhi said there's enough in the world for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. Our modern society is a greed-based, and ecological society will be a need-based. Nature is plentiful. There's no shortage of anything. Food, clothes, everything we need. Good air, good water, good soil, everything is there. We need to honor nature and live within our means and live within our need rather than greed. That is my vision of a new society. Stephan?
If I could add, I think that's absolutely right, of course, but I also think a society like that would be enfolded in a very healthy biodiverse ecology. So everybody will have access to nature, because one of our deepest needs as human beings is access to relatively wild nature. So I think if we have the kind of society you're talking about, Satish, everyone would have access to a bit of forest or a bit of woodland or the sea, and there'd be lots of interconnected corridors and big reserves of wild nature, which of course will regulate the planet. And we would reverence them, we'd have temples in them, we would meditate in them, and nature would then become a partner in our society rather than our adversary or our slave. It would become our partner. So I always think it's very important not just think about the human society, but about the more than human society, which is the society of birds, butterflies, bacteria, and all the living beings, the rocks, the atmosphere, the waters of the planet. They're part of our society as well. And those beings would have as much flourishing and richness in an ecological society as we humans would do.
Very good, very good. Thank you. I agree. Next question.
Yeah, Raffaella Schiefler says, could you also share how Schumacher alumni can overcome the resistance that scholars show to regard anything that is not rational and materialistic, especially in the academic environment? Probably all familiar with that.
Yeah, Stephan, you go.
Well, I mean, that's not easy. It's like they say, and there's a famous saying, you know, in science, if you want a paradigm in science to shift, you have to wait for the old professors to retire or, you know, leave the stage. So I think the strategy is to find young academics in the university system who can understand this and who want to cultivate this for you and for the students. And also to look for people in the university system who will be open. They're always there. There's a small number of people. One day, you know, the junior lecturer that you found maybe in Brazil somewhere, who is interested in all of this and can feel it and is cultivating their own meditative practice, etc., they will become a professor one day. And once they become the professor, the head of the department, they can have a massive influence. So in other words, it's the same thing, we learn in holistic science. A small disturbance or a small change in a complex system, a small change which seems insignificant, can suddenly trigger a massive avalanche of change. So in the university system, look for young, maybe old people, but academics who are receptive to these ideas. And they're there in every university, just hiding under the covers, waiting for someone like you, Raffaella, to come along and encourage them to espouse these views and teach them to the students.
Very good. I agree with that answer. Good. Let's take a question.
So Bob Thomas asks about, Thompson asks about whether you know about the convivial degrowth movement and what do you think of that way of seeing the process of healing the earth?
Yes, I agree with degrowth movement because I have written a book called Elegant Simplicity. So degrowth movement is very much in a way leading towards living more simply. At the moment, we are so wasteful in our consumption that 30% of food is wasted, and the clothes are wasted, and shoes are wasted. So much rubbish is being put on the landfills that is creating greenhouse gases. Therefore, if we have a degrowth, which means producing only what is needed and producing things which are beautiful, producing things which are useful, and producing things which are durable. I call it these three principles of degrowth. Things should be beautiful. I mean, growth economy does not take beauty into account. And if we have no beauty in the world, everything will be lost. Beauty is the food for the soul. Beauty is the food for the imagination, for our art, culture, poetry, music, architecture, gardening. Everything requires beauty. And so the growth movement has created so ugly production and ugly construction and ugly buildings and so ugly clothes. So we need to create beautiful things, but they should also be useful and they should also be durable. I call it the BUD principle, B-U-D, beautiful, useful, durable. So if we can have that, then that would fit in very well with the degrowth movement.
Thank you, Satish. Camilla asked a kind of question which is very closely related to that, which is about how do you balance the new paradigm with money? Is it possible to have profit in an ecological society?
Stephan.
Well, this is a difficult question for me because I don't understand economics, I must confess, very well. I'm an ecologist. I can understand the flows of carbon through plants and through the atmosphere. That's fine. But money, I find impossible to understand. All I can say is that there are some interesting thinkers who've been to the college, like Bernard Lyotard, who are rethinking what money should be. And the basic idea is that money shouldn't be a scarcity. It should be freely available to everyone. And we should realize that what's scarce is nature. The natural resources are scarce. We mustn't overexploit them. So I would recommend you look at some books by Bernard Lyotard and some Wolfgang Sachs and other economists that have been here. So I'm not ducking the issue. I'm just admitting that I'm not an expert and I'm not.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Money is good invention as a means of exchange. But at the moment, money has changed its nature. Money has become a symbol of status, symbol of power, and symbol of control. If we can change that, and if we can have money as a means to an end, means of exchange, then it's a useful invention. So in our new ecological society and a more egalitarian society, there will be money, maybe more local currencies, rather than this national and international currencies. At the moment, dollar rules the world, which is very unfortunate. I would like to see more local currencies, but local currencies used for exchange rather than holding and a kind of showing power. The money has power. Money is not wealth. People think wealth creation means money creation. Money is not wealth. Wealth is nature. Trees are wealth. Human imagination is wealth. Creativity is wealth. Human skills are wealth. but money is only a means to an end. So if we can change this concept of money, then profit will be only a little margin just to keep your books balanced. That's all. You don't make this enormous profit, which at the moment Google and Facebook and Apple and big companies are making billions and billions of profit. That will be illegal in an ecological society. We should make a small margin for survival, but mostly our activity is in the service of humanity and the service of planet Earth, and not for ego and not for personal glory and personal power and personal status. If we can change that, then money has a useful place.
Yeah, I'd just like to add about profit. I mean, the profit that I enjoy the most is the profit in my own expansion of awareness and consciousness and connection with others and sense of beauty. That's real profit. So if we could change the idea of profit from financial to spiritual, if you like, or psychological or well-being kind of profit, then we'll be working towards an ecological society. So we can totally change the concept of profit from to a more spiritual, in a more spiritual direction.
Very good.
Yeah, you're very good. I mean, it does feel like so much of the battle that we've got is about changing people's mindsets around continuous consumption and around the way in which they value themselves and see themselves valued by society. Not an easy direction for us to go. Sue Blackburn has a really interesting suggestion, which is about, could you also create kind of deep ecology? I think this is what she's saying, but this is how I've read it. So I apologize, Sue, if I've got this wrong. Could you create almost a kind of deep ecology toolkit that you could kind of an education system that can then be shared with other education systems rather than necessarily having to impose a new system on top of all these education? Could we infiltrate it with some kind of viral deep ecology program that got in there and changed it from inside?
Yeah, well, in my view, the word deep in deep ecology has got three aspects: a deep experience of connection with nature and connection with each other, and then deep questioning about how we should be living our lives in relation to our deep experience, and then deep commitment to do something about it. So I think the toolkit which we could create, I think, would focus on those three aspects. They're a bit like head, hearts, and hands from Satish. So yes, we could create a toolkit like that. But on the other hand, the problem with toolkits is that, you know, there's a one-size-fits-all kind of sense to them. And I think you have to be very sensitive to the local context where you're working. So the toolkit is great, but it should be adaptable to a school, to a university, to any other teaching situation. So yes, I'm in favor of toolkit, but as long as we remember that it must be flexible and must relate to each individual circumstance.
No, thank you. Laura Day Ashley asks about if we have a localized economy, then how do you perceive internationalism and globalization?
Yes, I can answer that.
Yeah.
The very old saying, think globally, act locally. So globalization should be globalization of our consciousness. I am a citizen of the world. The cosmos is my country. That's cosmology. The earth is my home. That's ecology. Nature is my family. So the birds in the sky are my brothers and sisters. The wild animals in my forest are my uncles and aunts. The nature is my family. And love is my religion. So this is the global thinking. We can have global consciousness about ecological paradigm. So I'm not a narrow-minded nationalist. I don't have any narrow-mindedness in anything, but our feet have to be rooted in the ground. Why French water should be sold in England or Scotland and Scottish water in France? That's a crazy way. And in order to transport French water to Scotland and Scottish Highland water to France, you have to build roads, railways, ships, aeroplanes, airports, seaports, infrastructure. We have to build all that infrastructure comes from nature. So we have to exploit nature. And therefore, the global economy should be 10%. Only in goods which cannot be made locally available or locally produced, 10 or 15%. but 80 to 85 to 90% of trade should be as local as possible. So we should have more things made in Devon, if I live in Devon, then maybe a little bit further southwest, then a little bit further, maybe England, then a little bit further, maybe Britain, a little bit further, maybe Europe. But so go a little bit further slowly, but more focus on local economy. If you want to have ecological balance, less exploitation of nature, less use of fossil fuel, less infrastructure, and more vibrant and vital ecological and natural systems, then we have to reduce our consumption and our need and our greed and our hunger and our thirst for exotic things from all over the world. And cheap things, cheap labor, clothes made in Bangladesh, cheap labor. We have to make good things, even they are expensive in money terms, they are cheaper in ecological terms. But Bangladesh clothes and Vietnam clothes and Chinese goods made economically, they might look cheaper, but environmentally and ecologically, they are very expensive. And therefore, this myth of cheap clothes and cheap food is a complete myth. It's very expensive on the environment. So we have to make local economy, and we have to have think globally and act locally. That is our motto.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Satish. Stephan, could I possibly ask you a question? The other day, I was lucky enough to see a talk you gave about Gaia, and you were playing music throughout. And I know music's been a really important part of your pedagogy. And I'm just really interested in the, you know, we talked about how cooking's important and how gardening's important, but also why you use music and how that kind of figures. And feel free to play while you tell us.
Well, I hear it. Here's my cuatro from Venezuela, where I was born. And you see, I mean, if I start talking about Gaia a little bit, you know, Gaia, the living earth, Gaia, our planet, then what happens with the music is it opens up your feeling. It brings our feeling into it. We can't relate to music unless we feel. And of course, our sensing, we have our sensing because we have to hear the music. And also our intuition, the music is telling us something without words. It's actually deeper than words. And our thinking, well, we can leave that behind when we're listening to the music. Or I could tell you a story, you know, a Gaia story, let's say the carbon cycle story. I could tell you the story with the music, but I won't. I'll just play a little bit. And why don't we just all think of what we've been discussing and exploring and let the music help us digest that.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephan. That's really lovely.
Very good.
And it does, I think it does take you to different places. You're kind of talking and playing. It's a really interesting kind of, you know, but I'm saying it's a tool. It's more than a tool, but in you know, in teaching terms, you can see how it really works. I've been asked by a couple of people if I can ask a question, which was in here, but from Huli Chen, which is about AI and robotics becoming more prevalent in our everyday life. How are AI and robotics perceived from the perspective of whole earth education, and what's the ideal right relation amongst AI, robotics, human beings and the earth? I think it's quite a lot wrapped up in there, but it's certainly coming at us fast, isn't it? The reality of that.
I'm very concerned about robotics, about AI. I mean, I have some experience programming computers myself. And I can't, there's just an intuitive feeling that it could be unbelievably dangerous. You know, what happens with us humans, with us Westerners particularly, we create amazing technologies, but we haven't got the wisdom to use them. So our wisdom hasn't caught up with the technology, and we end up with atom bombs, you know, and terrible things like that, and pesticides and all sorts of things that we're not wise enough to use. And I'm worried that AI is going to be another one. It's going to be like an atom bomb in our consciousness this time. We're not going to be able to tell whether AI is conscious or not. It's going to be almost like a quasi-consciousness sort of robotic person. So I worry about it. I've been thinking about this an awful lot. And my conclusion is that we shouldn't develop AI until we've developed sufficient wisdom to use it properly. We're running away with ourselves much too fast. And I'm worried the AI is going to take us over in some way and start dominating our lives. We're not wise enough to realize what might happen with AI. So those are my tentative views. I'm very concerned. Jim Lovelock wrote a book about this. His latest book was about how AI will take over the world. And he's probably right. It probably is going to happen. And it terrifies me. I would only support very limited use of AI at the moment until we've really developed a truly wise ecological society. And then probably we might not need it at all. And maybe for some instances, for example, for medicine, in some ways, we might need AI. For certain uses, it might be useful, but I'm worried it's going to become a sort of blanket thing. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to dominate every aspect of our lives. And that worries me. In that sense, I think it's anti-ecological.
I mean, I would agree with totally what Stephan has said. Actually, Tim, we have so much human intelligence that our intelligence is hardly used. We don't use the amount of intelligence we have in human consciousness and human mind. Incredible amount of intelligence. We use maybe 10 or 50 or 20% of our intelligence. So we are wasting this freely given intelligence by the universe, by nature, to each and every human being, decentralized and distributed to every 7 billion people. We don't use that intelligence available in an enormous amount, and we are wasting so many resources, so much time, so much money, so much effort in creating artificial intelligence, which is not necessary. So I think we have enough intelligence, human intelligence. We need to develop it, we need to cherish it, we need to celebrate it, and we need to use that more and more. At the moment, we are not using human intelligence. Why don't we use it? 10, 15, 20%, 80% of our human intelligence is unused. And so we need to use that first and not go for artificial intelligence.
Yeah, no, really good. And Gemma Herbertson's made a really good point, I think, in the thing about AI is only as good as the information fed into it. And in lots of ways, only as good as the kind of moral and ethical code that sits behind the people using it. And exactly. All of the conversations we had about education at the moment, I don't get the sense that our society would know the right way to drive it. But, very tricky. I think we maybe ought to start to move towards a kind of a last question, but there's a really beautiful question, which was the first one that was asked from Sakanama. And it's, do you have specific plans for the college for the next 30 years? It'd be really good to hear about the kind of the next 30-year plan.
Yeah, next 30-year plan. Stephan, do you have a next 30-year plan?
Well, I can only tell you my hopes for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
I would hope that Schumacher College stays small and beautiful within the larger Dartington family, so that we use the old postern, like we have done for the last 30 years, for cooking together, gardening together, eating together, teaching together in a small scale way. Within the larger Dartington, and that the Dartington has different educational enterprises, all interacting with each other like cells in our body. We have to have liver cells, lung cells. We don't want our cells to be all the same, because if they were all the same, we would fall apart like a lump of jelly. So I hope that we'd have that vision of Dartington as an organism with different interacting educational ventures, one of which would be Schumacher College. Small is beautiful, like it always has been, based at the old postern. That would be my vision. I hope that happens, and I'll very happily contribute to it. I won't be here in 30 years' time, but maybe our spirits will be around the college, just like Tagore. Here's a picture of Rabindranath Tagore. Can you see that outside the old postern at the college?
Oh, yeah.
That's Rabindranath Tagore. That was my office up there. He's still around. I mean, his spirit is still here. Where Satish and I and everyone who comes to the college is inspired by Tagore. And the last thing I would like to say, actually, is I think we need to, for the next 30 years, we need to bring Tagore much more into our considerations and into our thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. I'm studying Tagore very much, and I find he's just full of wisdom, full of brilliant guidance, and full of the spirit, the deep spirit of Dartington. Otherwise, in other words, if it hadn't been for Tagore, we wouldn't have Dartington. I don't think we haven't really cultivated, all of us who work at Dartington, we could cultivate a knowledge and connection with him much, much more. And I think if we do that, Schumacher College will flourish, and Dartington will flourish for the next 30 years, maybe the next 300, 3,000 years. I hope so.
That's very good. No, I agree with that. And I think Schumacher College should remain, because we named the college after E.F. Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful. So that is absolutely right, that we should remain small and beautiful and a community. But Schumacher type of examples spreading around the world. So my hope is that Schumacher College become multiplied, and in many parts of Britain, like we have many, many universities around the world and around the country. In the same way, there are many, many small scale, ecologically oriented and socially oriented and spiritually oriented colleges and schools and universities flourish and emerge around the country, around the world, in every country. So example of that kind, I would like to see. That's my vision. And I would like to see that people who have been to Schumacher College go out back to their countries and create their own examples, so that Schumacher College becomes an inspiration. I don't want people to copy Schumacher College in their country. Each country should have their own genius, their own culture, their own tradition, and based in that, but take the spirit of Schumacher College, the ethos of Schumacher College, interpret it in your own way and create your own place in your own country. That will be my vision for the next 30 years.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. I think maybe that's probably a good point for us to draw it to a conclusion. And Satish and Stephan, thank you so much. What a great evening. Absolutely beautiful. Maybe I could just say a few words as we go along, but Stephan, I could see you've got your quattro out, so please feel free to play along.
I'll play along as you speak. No, I can't. It won't work with Zoom, will it? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it will. It'll be fine. Okay. So first of all, I just wanted to thank everybody again for joining us tonight and supporting the work of Schumacher College. And also, I just wanted to re-mention a couple of things that we'd spoken about a minute ago. So on the 21st of May, we're holding a Schumacher College 30th anniversary commemorative book launch. And that'll be both face-to-face at Dartington and online. But places at Dartington are likely to be really strictly limited. So if you're interested, I would get on and look at the pages on the website in relation to that. And again, in association with the 30th anniversary celebration, we've also got this essay competition that Satish mentioned. So education as if people and planet matter. So, and that's in collaboration with Resurgence and Ecologist magazine. It's got a deadline of the 1st of July, so everybody's got loads of time to be able to do this. So we're expecting at least one essay from each of you. And you can find lots more details about that on the Dartington and the Schumacher College website. I don't want to say a great deal more, I think, because it's been such a lovely and inspirational evening. But I just want to thank again Stephan and Satish for such a great talk, and really brilliant to hear about your experience.
And thank you, Tim, for coordinating and chairing so beautifully and presenting it so lovely. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.